I'm Suzi Landolfi, and welcome to Be Crazy Well. Now, why would a therapist say that? Because we all have mental health struggles, even therapists. The good news is we have so much more information about how we can be crazy well. On my podcast, we don't focus on what's wrong with us. We want to know what happened to us. We're going to explore how trauma affected us, both negatively and positively. That's right. I said positively. It's called post-traumatic growth, and it's a real thing. Be Crazy Well will share mental health wellness practices, the newest mental health research, and most importantly, how we all get to create the person we deserve to be and the life we deserve to live. So join the mental health evolution and be crazy well. Welcome, everybody. Look who's here. We have two podcasters from Coming Home Well. That's how we got started. That's how we got introduced. You're with Mike Kim and Suzi Landolfi. And we have the distinction of, first of all, being professional disruptors. We're always looking into new things and ways to help the veteran community and also push back sometimes on the mental health community, start the mental health evolution. And we also have the distinction, and I don't know if you know how this happened, Mike, but we all of a sudden got chosen as being one of the top 50 podcasts, mental health podcasts right now out there. So I don't know about you, but I was pretty surprised. I didn't know I was up for it. I didn't even know someone was looking at it.
I think that maybe the hard work and our guests have influenced that, but I'm not sure as far as like the metrics. But I'll for that selection, but I'll take it any way I could get it. So it's great.
It is great. And I wanted to give a big shout out to Coming Home Well, because we're part of that network.
Yeah.
Cindy Thompson, this amazing producer of ours, saw something in both of us and took the risk. I'm a huge risk. I know that. You're a little less of a risk because you look like you're a little more in the box, and you are so far out of the box. It's amazing. And it's such a pleasure to be able to say that, because that's how things get better. When we're pushing back a little bit, when we're not just accepting what's handed to us, especially in the medical model, especially in the medical field. You and I have talked in the past saying that, modern mental health started with drilling holes in people's heads. Thank goodness I don't have a drill, and we're not doing that anymore. And I get excited about people like yourself that are going to say, okay, wait a minute, why aren't we looking at this differently? Why is this the way that it has to be? So I just want to thank you for all of that, because we need more of that. And the veteran community deserves that. They deserve that kind of pushback, that kind of wonderful research and inquiry, and being curious and asking questions, even questions that make people uncomfortable.
I definitely agree with you. And I see you as one who can offer different shows with guests and also your own experience and knowledge to ask those critical questions, but also really get into the lives of the different people that you interview, as well as get into the lives of people that they're connected to, because it's usually not just one person in front of the screen that we're interviewing. And I think that makes a huge difference, especially in the veteran terrain, because we're always trying to get as many voices as possible. I know that the military structure, it's all about rank, right? Or the job you did, right? So it's either you're like an officer, or you're like a high enlisted person, or you're like in the special operations community, or whatever. You've got some type of specialty job, and then that's how you get your attention, and that's how the military, what I call the military media, cultural machine kind of, not bad, not good. It's just the way it is, right? It's the political economy that I think exists, and that's just constantly circulating. And so the folks that we get on, you know, um, might be connected to that. But then I know, especially with you, you have a lot of folks that, cover many different domains within the veteran terrain. And surely I try to do that as well. But it's great that we're both kind of like trying to get other voices out there, and then maybe finding our voice in these other voices, not to replicate, but to show difference, but at the same time, solidarity.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Difference and solidarity. One of the things that has been on my mind a lot lately is not using the word but. If I say but, I'm talking about someone's ass, because I'm not saying it anymore. It's going to be an and, because so many times two, three, four things can coexist. And what I also like is as far as being brought up as a civilian, I see in my experience of working with veterans and being in the veteran community as a sort of outside looking in, and then being on the inside, but not really having the experience, is that you're definitely a hybrid. Like every veteran started out, even if you grew up in a military family, you grew up in a civilian world, right? For the most, you could have, yeah, you could have been on an army base, but the fact remains is you also had a lot of experience in the civilian world, and then you go in the military, and then you have to go back to the civilian world. So you're always going to be a hybrid. You're always going to have both. You're always going to have an and. And so I think that one of the nice things about what we do at Coming Home Well, and what you do at Veterans, et cetera, and what I'm doing here at Be Crazy Well, is this constant connection, collaborating, connecting. Many veterans are married or live with a civilian. And so therefore, that is a wonderful way that we get a lot of voice and ideas and experience from different perspectives, different, even standing in a different place. I know that when if I stand over here, I have a different perspective of my room than if I standing over here and look at, oh, I have a door. I didn't realize I have a door, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's a wonderful way to look at even like our approaches, right? Like, as far as looking at what is efficacious for veterans in regards to their treatment, to their wellness, to their care, to their follow-up. And that's why I really, I made it a point when I delivered my presentation, lecture, whatever you want to call it, when I was invited by University of North Texas last April, not this past April, I guess April 2022, at their medical center. My concept of veteran readjustment culture, or military/veteran readjustment culture, because I just really feel that these different conversations go beyond like a movie that's shown, or the latest treatment that comes up that is featured in JAMA. There's just something always happening, right? And when we're capturing that through different voices,
Yes.
that's like the readjustment culture that's distinct from regular veteran culture, that will just say, hey, have you seen the new Rambo movie? Hey, have you seen the new Toby Keith song about veterans? But what are the conversations tied to all of that? And what, who are the people and the places, and whether they have rank or not, or no rank, or have influence or no influence.
I loved a word that I have not heard anybody really use, unless you're in mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, readjustment. Like, I got to go and readjust this screw over here, like my carburetor, my whatever. I'm going to readjust something. So something still exists, and I'm going to readjust it so that it is more efficacious, like you said. It works better. It does its job better. And I want you to talk a little bit about you using that word readjustment, because almost every VSO talks about transition, my own included.
Right.
MVP talks, oh, we're going to transition. I go, dude, I transition from the bathroom to the bedroom 3 times a day. It literally, even at night, I'm always transitioning, right? And readjustment. And I want to say one thing real quick before you launch into that, because it's so important. When I worked with children in the Native American community, we talk about diagnosis, every single child I met had a diagnosis of an adjustment struggle. Now they say disorder. I don't even want to say that. I just want to say they were adjusting all the time. And sometimes they did it gracefully and sometimes they didn't. And once they adjusted, the diagnosis went away, which I love. So talk to me about your support and why you use the word readjustment. What does that mean to you?
Well, I liked how you gave the mechanical engineering example there, or the analogical understanding from that. When I look at readjustment, I often see this, and this is what's missing with like transition or integration. Readjustment fully looks at, now there's no exact time to this. It could be enmeshed in regards to time. It 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 it, it just has to be there, and that's who is the military person before the military, who's the military person during the military service, and then after. So those, usually in transition, right? You hear, oh, veteran transition. Well, that's just focusing on, you know, your
After.
present post. Yeah, your post, or integration. It seems as though you've got to kind of be molded in a certain way into society, like forced in some way, right? But readjustment is just kind of like what you were saying earlier. At the same time, focusing a lot on those 3 stages that are often ignored, or there's only one component dealt with, in uh, the mental health assessment, or when treatment is given, or follow up. No, I'm encouraging these 3 aspects of the veteran to be looked at with everything that happens within the veteran domain, whether it's involving mental health or not. Even like a movie, I think that it's great that, they show Rambo, but I think in the book it talks about Rambo when he was like younger or something like that, First Blood, but in the movie you never see like when he like enlisted or anything like that, or how his home life was. You never get to see that, right? And so that's supposed to be the greatest veteran movie, ever. Sands of Iwo Jima, John Wayne movie, bad or good. You never get to see that, right? Um, and then you definitely don't get to see the different aspects of what it means to be home, and I just think that readjustment involves all that. What are your thoughts on readjustment?
I think it makes perfect sense, because you basically, when you readjust something, you're not saying the whole thing is bad. You're not saying it has to be thrown out. You don't have to say like, oh, we got to get a new one. Right? You're just saying we just have to readjust parts
Yeah,
of, right?
yeah.
Or
It's like in being a sniper. I wasn't a sniper, but from what I hear, some of my dearest friends, my best friend Rudy Reyes, the sniper, for Special Forces, the Fox TV show, the team leader. You know, um, it's about, really kind of like calibrating, right? Your It's
Now
like
the
calibrating a target, in many ways, or as I've done in different things, I call it titrating up, titrating down. Just yeah, but it's like what you're saying.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And I think for me, what happened was I started to work with these amazing women and men, and they were given a diagnosis of PTS. And the only question that was asked was, how many times did you deploy? And then they'd come to my retreat after getting all their buckets of meds and their diagnosis. And they would come. And then the one question I would ask them was, would you go back tomorrow? I would go back tomorrow. And I'm going, okay, wait. Wait a minute. You got this diagnosis, you got this bag of pills, and you lost a leg. And you're telling me you go back tomorrow. So one of the things that your readjustment makes sense is the symptoms of PTS actually make you a superhero downrange. Hypervigilance, no tolerance for mistakes, because people die when you mistake. I mean, you go through those symptoms and you're going to go, oh my God, that makes Rambo. That's the skills that he has. You take those same symptoms and you put him in Walmart with somebody, and now all of a sudden he's messed up or she's messed up. So what I love about readjustment is sometimes we're just readjusting their environment, not even them. Like I want somebody to be hyper vigilant if all of a sudden we had a car crash and we're out in the woods and we need to make sure that we can see what's coming and what's not and where's the food. And I mean, like, how is it that we call these symptoms bad when in fact they can be helpful in a different environment? And they were. And most of them got them before they went into the military, because you and I are one of the few people talking about what happened to them before the military.
Yeah, and the shameful thing, and I noticed this with the VA. And when I talk about the VA, let me just say I'm the biggest fan of the VA. The VA helped save my life. I'm one of the few people that is few veterans who talks about suicide, because I attempted suicide, a really bad one, and no one talks about the suicide survivor
Right.
and his narrative or her narrative. And I've been more and more open about it because it's an issue of like advocacy, as far as not just looking at the numbers 21, 22. How did they try to do it? Why did they do it? In my case, I wanted my son to have my life insurance because, you know, I was being threatened unjustly by the VA as a war trauma site director, um, of things that were untrue because I whistle blew. And so I was just gonna blow my grid, as they say in the military. I was just gonna take everyone out with me, and it was gonna be for my son. So it was a very different narrative than what you hear or what you see in a lot of movies of like, oh, boohoo. And those are really sad things. But I was using suicide at that time as a very warrior act, much like what you said, as far as the symptoms. Like, who wouldn't want to look after uh, their men? My son being my men at that particular time, and now, uh, who wouldn't want to show that type of bravery? Suicide in the military, and I don't condone it. And what I say is through a lot of help and the VA, not always getting it right, but finally a certain part of the VA, at least in Manhattan, God bless, those people who really acted in a way that was in the public service, in the public domain, for the public. Me as a veteran, not as bottom line, as in how can we shove this person in a certain facility and just limit the symptoms without the narrative.
Right.
And my narrative, like other narratives, is important to look at. And I think when you're talking about the symptoms and you're providing a certain narrative as far as how a clinician should read a veteran, with a particular diagnosis, and you gave a perfect case example of like how to maybe look at PTSD in that light, that a lot of these symptoms were helpful while on duty, but may not be as useful while going shopping at Walmart with your family. And then the phenomenology of it all is, and I'd like to hear more of like what you say on this is, what next, right? I think folks want to say what next, and I think you and I are the type that we can identify problems, but we also offer the what next.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. One of the things that was what next for me, and I don't think we do it enough in the mental health space, is what next, meaning what else did you get that was helpful? What did you get from your experience in the military that actually is very helpful in any space? And the one thing I can say is, I don't know about you, but I was never taught about post-traumatic growth when I went to go get my license and my master's degree in clinical psychology. It's been around for 37 years, and yet it's not presented, and it's not encouraged. I don't know if you know this, but I think it's going to be June 13th, which just passed, was deemed Post-Traumatic Growth Day. And I'm going to give the credit to Boulder Crest, which is, I'm honored to say I was one of the people that helped create the curriculum of the retreat based on post-traumatic growth. So I think the what next is taking a look at the entire spectrum. Mike, I got two of my greatest superpowers from my abusive dad. That's just a fact. Now, did I get a lot of stuff from him that has hurt me and I've had to deal with and I've had to help manage and heal from? Absolutely. But there's a fact that I got two of my greatest superpowers from him as well. And I don't want to take, sometimes, and many times, the veterans tell me the greatest thing they've ever done is to go fight for their country. And then they're going to come home, we're going to tell them the worst thing you've ever done for your family is fight for your country, because look what it's done to you. As opposed to taking a look at, and you have these superpowers. You have these 5 areas in your life that you now can continue to grow and be able to be of service to your family and your community. I think that's the what next for me, is how come these men and women come home and they aren't revered, much like in a Native community. A warrior in a Native community was revered to be a protector, not just on the battlefield, but in every space of the community and the tribe.
I know that, and yeah, you have great insight on that. Yeah, and I'm brought to the origins of the vet center system, RCS, not big VA, but RCS. They did all that. They just didn't have the language, but they started that in '79, and they started the diagnosis for PTSD. There were, peer support programs. Directors were actually, non-clinical. It was very multidisciplinary. And they would look at what you're saying. I don't know if they still do. I retired in 2018, but I know that as I was leaving, I started to see, not saying that it's all bad. I think the vet centers are actually a wonderful place to get some of what you're talking about, and other programs. There are certain things that the vet center can't do that other places do. And my thing is, although I believe in the public service in healing veterans, I believe that when that's not available, that particular type of care that's needed, I do think that at times we need to rely on private sector services, and to be, as you said, like something adjacent, something accompanying the VA. And yeah, I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense, and you made me just think about the vet centers, because they're forgotten. There's like over 300, across the country, and they're in every community, and they kind of focus on, and I'd like to hear more from that perspective. I know that in the vet center training, they do talk about the strength-based type of
Yes.
approach.
Solution focused, strength based. That is military. I don't know anything more military than a mental health program called strength based solution focused. That's what we started with at Boulder Crest before we even heard the words post traumatic growth, because we knew that's where you came from. We also knew that training is what you're used to doing as opposed to therapy. So when we called our program PATH, and it was suggested we call it, progressive and alternative therapies healing heroes. I, as the therapist, said, no, do training. I train all the time. I'm always training. And the other thing I know that I do is I know how to practice. I went to dance practice. I went to theater practice. I went to, any kind of sports practice. My grandson used to go to baseball practice. We have a medical practice, you have a law practice, you have a yoga practice, we have practice. That's what you're going to learn. And that's how you're going to get good at something. It's exactly what the military does, is they have you practice. And then when they change something, they have you practice again. And I would be so happy if the mental health world was less about talking and more about practicing. Like, I don't want you to live in my office. I don't need you to come and live in my office. So those old house calls are important to me again, that idea. And you said it best with the vet centers. That's where it can all take place. That's what people could practice.
Yeah. I think it's things that you're saying that can prepare us for the next war, things that can prepare us for a present situation where you've got folks in the veteran domain readjusting. Here, I'm using this term again, but like they're trying to figure it out, right? Because we haven't had this like continuous state of war, affecting the majority of our troops. But yeah, it does come down to training, to practice, and making sure that not in a kind of micromanagement kind of way, something that you and I are really staunchly against, but in a way that's really going to, challenge and care for that veteran in the veterans like immediate community, family, and social group.
When I first started to work with veterans, I'll tell you a real quick story. So I'm at my ranch.
Yeah.
This old black beat up van comes down the long driveway. And I'm like, oh my God, it looks like a child abduction van. And I said, oh, there's no kids in there. Oh, it's this crazy looking guy, thin, funny hat, one arm, and an English accent. Out gets his wife. She looks like Morticia. She has this beautiful black hair with a white streak. And he says, hello, I would like to do a drum circle here. I'm a drummer, and we do this drum circle for veterans. And I went, oh, well, my dad was a drummer. That's awesome. Come on over here. And I find a space that overlooks the ocean at my ranch. And we are all excited about it. And then he says, I understand you do equine therapy. And I go, yes. And he goes, will you do that with the veterans when they come that day too? And I said, I'll be happy to. And so we make a date, and they get back in the van and they drive off. And my young staff says, do you know who that was? And I go, I don't care as long as there's no kids in that van. And they go, no, that's Rick Allen, the one-armed drummer from Def Leppard. And so he brings him down. Now, why did Rick Allen get involved with veterans?
I need to hang out with you more.
Yeah. Oh my God, it was so much fun. So why I'm telling you this is because I am going to connect you with Lauren and Rick. And so Rick was just attacked. I forget what town, I think it might have been New York. He's coming out of the hotel, and literally someone attacked him and had a knife. And then a young woman came, and Rick's on the ground trying to tell him, like, I'm not here to hurt you, man. I'm not here to hurt you. He's obviously having some kind of psychotic break. A young woman, I think one of his staff tried to intervene, and she got hurt a little bit. And there's been some scuttlebutt about how, oh, if that happened to me, I wouldn't have any weakness like PTS. I want you to hear that. And these are from people that know him. And he's one of the strongest young men I know, and he's younger than me. Anyway, I'm telling you this because when I'm talking to Lauren, and they have a wonderful nonprofit called the Raven Drum Foundation, you should look it up.
I will.
They want to have more discussion about how PTS is a normal reaction to an abnormal situation.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it doesn't have to be something that ruins you. It is a way for your body to try to process and deal with, right? That's what it is. And every single effect of any kind of a trauma, I always say everything's like salsa. I got here to California and I'd never had Mexican food before. And then all of a sudden they have this amazing food. And I go, whoa, New England, we don't have that food that much. We didn't when I was growing up. Anyway, I always say everything's mild, moderate, and severe. It's just like salsa. And therefore, we don't even talk about the idea of PTS or anything, any effect of anything that happens to us, if we don't talk about the story, because we don't know, and we don't talk about why knowing the severity of something is as important to know if you have something. That's so important. And Rick and Lauren are on this new quest now to talk about PTS in a way that it says that is a normal reaction to an abnormal situation.
And I want to get your perspective on this. And I've struggled with this for a while, but I'm more open about it just because I think, and you don't do this, and I don't think anyone at Coming Home Well does this. And surely a lot of, my peers who I trust don't have this attitude, but I do see it, like in veteran mass culture, where, the broken parts where they say, people are broken, this and damaged and all of this. Now, on one end, they're just totally misguided by using that type of language. But I'm trying to find a certain type of language that acknowledges the damages, right? Because the thing is that the government doesn't want to look at, for example, okay, you went through this shitty life, whatever, your parents abandoned you, and I love my parents, and they just did it because Reagan killed farming, and I was a casualty out of it, but the thing is that and there were kids abandoned during the Great Depression, so and they grew up to be incredible heroes, and on more, the greatest generation, right? There was even orphan trains, during that time. So the thing is that our system, our culture, in many ways, certain governmental programs, they'll kind of use a language of brokenness as if the doom and gloom happened, they essentialize it so that, okay, this is what happened to you when you were young. So you couldn't have clearly not been affected in a war, being involved in this rocket attack or seeing these dead kids. And this is just part of your childhood, which is in many ways a misinterpretation of Freud, I think, in many ways. And also just a convenient way to not deal with the problem at hand. And that is that we're compounded with these stressors and these conditions and maladies. And yes, we grow from them, but I lost the family out of it. I'll never be able to replace, those years that I lost with my son. That's reality. My growth is accepting those losses but not in some kind of way like, a lot of the discourse in government, or even you see folks that may not even be trained in, they may be trained philosophers, they may be trained theologians, but they talk about moral injury without understanding maybe a lot of the clinical dimension to moral injury. And I'm trying to find that in many ways, as far as recognizing the damage done, the losses, and to integrate that in the readjustment process, in what you've been talking about as far as the growth.
You said something so important. When we want to honor and thank and be grateful to military women and men, I couldn't think of anything better than to help them holistically from the moment they were born, pre-moment they were born. Let's talk about ancestry and the ancestor trauma, historical trauma, all the way to where they are now. Like, why is it that we're going to compartmentalize? And because when you started this conversation and you just talked about your family and the historical trauma of losing their livelihood, and I have no desire, nor will I support working with these men and women and not talking about everything that happened to them. Everything. They deserve that. They've always deserved it. And I'm not just going to ask about, well, what'd you do in the service? And where did you play? That's bullshit. And I'm not going to support it. I'm not going to enable that. Because then I'm also not talking about what truly might be affecting them more PTS wise, even before going downrange. I don't have that enough knowledge until I know their story. And you have been bringing up your story during this entire podcast, which is makes you a whole person. You're a whole person that had, pre military, post-military, and that's happening all the time. And they're interchanging and they're readjusting to each other. And I can't tell where one ends and one begins. I can't, and I'm not going to be a part of that. So there.
Right. Yeah,
Above.
but you pointed a great, design, right? And I kind of use that a lot in my understanding of readjustment culture, veteran readjustment culture. And there is, you even put it like this in many ways, roots that come together, and rhizomes that uh, named by Felix Guattari and Gilles, I'm not name dropping, Deleuze, in their kind of nomadic understanding of like philosophy. And one of them was a clinician who was Guattari. Uh, I'm only mentioning this not to show off, but to add to the dialogue, because I feel as though when people say, where does Mike come from, with all this? And it's like, no, I spend a lot of time, and you do too. And this will be helpful, this understanding of a nomadic type of understanding where there's no fixed identity, right?
Yes.
And that's the how you painted it, a couple minutes ago, just really kind of, I'm giving you kind of like this theoretical understanding that you have. But I just spoke to Dr. John Baldacchino about that, because his theory in art is about unlearning. And so he and I are working on a concept of military unlearning.
Well,
And that military unlearning is basically everything that you started the show with, as far as how to look at things as a disruptor, and how not to stay fixed on traditional approaches to all of this, war trauma, diagnosis, approaching vets, and treating them and caring for them and challenging them. But what more is there?
love that. What more is there? I hope there's more of you and I doing this. That's what I hope there's more.
Yeah, yeah.
That
I do
fulfills
too.
my soul, my soul, my work, my own life, and me still working on me. So these dialogues and this sharing is absolutely, it's life force for me. It's what
Mhm.
helps me be able to go do what I do for myself, for those I love, and for the general community. And I can't thank you enough for spending this time together. And I can't thank Coming Home Well enough. Again, what kind of strength and courage they have to put the two disruptors, the two greatest disruptors I've met, and know that like we're just gonna, say what you're gonna do it what way? What are you gonna do? So I thank them very much for this platform and for you to be here.
I do too, and I thank you, and I'd like you to uh, and I maybe look at some of these traditional uh, names, right, for some of these maladies tied to military readjustment, and maybe we can have periodically. And this is just an invitation. I know we've mentioned this. I'm not saying this is something original. I'm just saying that we've talked about it, but I think you know, we should share with our audience in the future some of how these traditional, you know, we started with PTSD, but maybe we can go into um, depression. We can go into uh, dissociate the dissociative aspects of war trauma, military sexual trauma. I just think that we have um, our own specific interpretations that I think would be very useful for our audience.
I'm
So
honored.
thanks.
I'd love to do it. And thank you again for spending this time. And thank everybody who pops on to Coming Home Well and finds all these wonderful podcasts. It's not just Mike and I, there's many,
Yeah.
and we're growing now. We have a caregiving network that we've just made a partnership with. So there's that as well. So check us out. Mike, Kim, bless you. Bless you for all you do. And I wish you strength, well, and healing, that you don't have to lose any of this. Let's bring all your memory back. We'll bring all your memories back. We're going to, just like in the gym, we're going to get that brain of yours stronger again, because it's so funny. I just have to say this, Mike. You have so much brain power. If you just lost a little bit of it, you'd still be ahead of everybody else in the friggin' country. So I just want you to know that. I just want you to
Thank
know,
you.
lose a little. Don't worry about it, because you got more than most of us all put together. All
All
right.
great. Thank you.
Bless you.
Have a enjoy the rest of the day. Thank
I
you.
will. Bless you.
Bye.